So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We start earlier than yesterday. I think some other people will join for this session, which is the continuation of this World Conference on Science and Art for Sustainability. Yesterday, we heard about contributions from natural sciences and from arts and humanities. This session is about contributions from social and humanistic sciences with four distinguished speakers and on very different topics: archaeology, political science, economics, and law. So just want to remind to the speakers they have 20 minutes each for the presentations. That you didn't know, maybe. I mean, we have time in the session, but we want to keep a bit of time for interactions with the audience, with the public. And that said, all that said, which is not so much, let's start immediately with archaeology. And we have with us Professor Nemanja Mrđić from the Institute of Archaeology in Belgrade. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So it's my honor to greet you on behalf of the Institute of Archaeology in Belgrade and the project Viminacium, which is one of the most important archaeological projects in Serbia today. Viminacium is a part of the huge World Heritage property. Actually, we are now being described in next years, while others are already inscribed. And what you can see, Viminacium is one of the most important strongholds on the frontiers of the Roman Empire, going all the way from United Kingdom and Hadrian's Wall over the rivers Rhine and Danube all the way to the Black Sea, then across the Turkey and Middle East and North Africa. This is a huge archaeological site, 7,500 kilometers, 21 countries on 3 continents. And most of the Europe is inscribed already as a cultural heritage site under auspice of UNESCO, and Serbia, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Romania are the final component being inscribed next year, hopefully. So here we are on the Danube, and this is part of Roman Empire that we are now talking about, and you see Viminacium positioned here and Singidunum positioned here. These two large legionary fortresses are flanking the open plains of Pannonia, protecting the interior of the Roman Empire for barbarian invasions. Of course, the Danube is the barrier, and what is in China, the Great Wall of China, Romans used different tactics, and instead of wall, they used the huge river as a barrier, but putting a chain of fortifications in behind the banks to protect the interior of the empire. Viminacium and Singidunum are the best and the largest stronghold, each holding one legion, so the elite troops of the Roman army. Viminacium is on the crossroad, and if it is always known and always the best documented site according. You can see it here. We have Viminacium is here. This is the Tabula Peutingeriana, one of the copies of the Roman maps, and you can clearly see the different rows spreading away from Viminacium in different directions. So this is, at the moment, the most important trade route and the crossroad in the Roman Empire and the territory of Serbia. And when the Danube is not the military barrier in the times of peace, of course, it's the most important trade route, as it is today. And of course, the army, when it gets best paid, as the best paid Roman part of the society, all the Roman troops are followed by traders, by craftsmen, by their families, and next to each legionary fortress, a city emerges. And the city that emerged by the legionary fort at Viminacium became the provincial capital and the largest part and the largest city of the province Mesia Superior, covering the province of Serbia. So this is today, and as you see, one of the roads led to Lederata at present-day Ram, crossed to the province of Dacia. The next one went along the Iron Gate, in the direction of the Iron Gate, and the third route led into hinterland, directly to the very rich mines, even these mines in the Homolje, Bor, Majdanpek. These are even today some of the most important and richest mines in Serbia. And the Viminacium was used to distribute this ore along the frontier and in the other parts of the empire. Of course, the river transport was, even in the Roman times, the most effective and productive way of transport. And it's also documented in all the manuscripts, in the Notitia Dignitatum, the register of dignitaries, from the late 3rd, early 4th century, and you can see it here depicted. And in the list of units, you can see that it's the seat of the prefect of the Septima Claudia Legion, one cavalry detachment, and the prefect of the fleet. So command of the land troops and command of the fleet guarding the Danube was stationed here. So Viminacium was never lost. We didn't have chance, like Pompeii, to be buried and protected. It is marked on all medieval maps, and as we are coming to the modern ages, up to the 19th century, most of the archaeological remains were still visible, and the travelers going around saw something. And even Viminacium is one of the longest excavated projects in Serbia. It is excavated since 1882. But unfortunately, the vision to present it, exploit its cultural heritage, was always a problem. So everything you will see from now on is actually a result of the project when Miomir Korać took the project. And with the vision to make city that completely disappeared into one of the hugest archaeological parks in Europe, and definitely the most important archaeological park in Serbia, is now what you see. Viminacium is located between the coal mine that is going around the city. This is one of the older photos, but now coal mine spreads all the way around the archaeological site, and you have the power plant. So you have cultural heritage squeezed in between strong industrial zones. And that was a real challenge, how to protect, excavate, present, and finally exploit the cultural heritage through tourism. Even today, the Ministry of Science, especially under Minister Begovic, insisted that science should be commercialized. And archaeology, when you cannot sell your finds, it's illegal and it's not ethical. But through tourism and presentation, it's the best way to commercialize archaeology as science. And this is the strategy that we started in 2006 and that we are now spreading and developing even further. So we have the legionary fortress, we have the huge city, and it's more than 100 hectares. And what you see, it's fertile fields. The city disappeared. As I said, we didn't have the volcano to bury us and protect us. So when in medieval ages, when Smederevo fort was built, when Golubac fort was built, Ram fort was built, they exploited stone from Roman ruins and built medieval forts. And today, we have no visible remains on the surface. But 20 years of geophysics helped us a lot. And today we know the floor plan of the city, we know the communications, we know the cemeteries. The coal mine was a huge challenge. The power plant was a huge challenge. The power plant was built on the southern cemetery of Viminacium. The coal mine spreading around went through parts of the cemeteries, parts of the Roman villas, suburban settlements, and so on. And, okay, we could protect city, we could protect the legionary fortress, but coal is still the strategic resource for electricity production for Serbia. And we had a very good cooperation with the power industry because they are obliged to what they are about to destroy, to salvage and invest into protection and excavation. And that's why Viminacium, more or less, still looks the same. Only 1% to 2% are excavated. But on the contrary, we have almost 90% of the city surroundings excavated. And the power industry, as the most important stakeholder in Požarevac region, of course became our best friend and help us and invest and support us in presenting the cultural heritage. Of course, you can remove graves, you can move it into the museum and so on. So we did excellent cooperation with them and managed to protect and present whatever was found endangered, and now it's presented in parts of the archaeological park. From parts of the cemeteries, parts of the aqueducts, ships, everything now is moving into the zone of the archaeological park. So the strategy of the Romans, you can see it's visible on the coins and the stone monuments. We have a beautiful girl, personification of the province Mesia, bull and lion. And you can see the same iconography in stone, on many obverses in different variants, with insignia or not, but it's always flanked and is putting her hands on the bull and lion. So, the bull is the symbol of Septima Claudia Legion, stationed at Viminacium. The lion was the symbol of the 4th Flavia Legion, stationed here in Belgrade, only a few hundred meters from here. So it gives you clear strategy of the Roman organization here in Serbia. Province relies on its elite forces, on its legions in Belgrade and Viminacium. So typical example of the military propaganda. So this is what we are facing. You can see the coal mine spreading around us. The archaeological team, since 2002, spent 12 months a year excavating every day, every year, every month, every hour, desperately working, and it's hundreds of hectares covered each year. The coal mine now destroyed more than 4,000 hectares, and every piece of land is now explored by the archaeologists. And therefore, in some segments, we know the city surroundings better than the city itself. So cemeteries. Now we have the hugest sample of ancient population. At the area of the power plant, at the area of the coal mine, we have excavated for more than 14,000 graves. And now we can really talk about cosmopolitan character of the city, because what you cannot follow through the city, because when you die, someone else moves, they throw out your things. If you find a piece from Asia Minor or Egypt, is a trade import or someone brought it, it can always be questioned. But through cemetery, you find people, you find their own property. And it confirms that Viminacium is a cosmopolitan city, like New York today. Multicultural, multi-ethnical, multi-religious in all parts. And it's not just the trade. We have people coming from South Sudan, from Africa. DNA proved that. So it's not a speculation. We have definite proof that soldiers and the losses of the legion soldiers were filled from troops from Africa. We have Syrian traders, we have Greek traders, soldiers coming from United Kingdom, from France, from Algeria and Libya, from all parts of the empire. And you can follow the trade routes and the money circulation coming first from the west, from the Rome, from Lugdunum, from France, then moving to the east, from Nicaea, from Constantinople, and other means, and so on. So Viminacium, through its cemeteries, became the most famous site because it proved the circulation of people within the Roman Empire, far in the provinces. We're not talking about the Rome itself. Everybody wants to go to Rome. What is now American dream, 2000 ago was Roman dream. But here, far from Rome, on the frontier, where dangers lurk, where there is threat of barbarians, you have a city that's flourishing, and all people from all over the empire are coming. These are tombs of the distinctive people from Viminacium. They're, of course, at Viminacium. But our art historians, analysis of pigments, confirms that this is work of people who either studied or came from Alexandria in Egypt. So you have, again, connection. It's not connection 20, 30, 40 kilometers. It's the other part of the Roman Empire, across the Mediterranean. And these artists come to distinguish the person who lived and died at the frontier. Of course, the richness of peoples are the results of the trade, results of the enormous quantities of money pouring into the army to protect its frontier. And of course, when you start excavations, from the beginning, Miomir Korać decided that Viminacium will be not like other sites that will close during winter. No, every site is carefully excavated, protected, and presented that you can visit it all year round. And we are the only park open 12 months a year, closed on 2 days, on 1st of January and on Christmas only. And of course, what was now visible once was underground, but gradually we are excavating, we are presenting, and the vision is that everything you excavate, thank you, is put into the future in the presentation. So you excavate amphitheater, we hold the concerts. What was the middle of the nowhere with no roads? Roads were built. Now you have full infrastructure. The archaeological park is fully developing. We have guides. The original guides were part of the archaeological team. You excavate in the morning, you are tourist guide in the afternoon. But now we have full infrastructure. The archaeological park now employs 40 more people in support of archaeology. What was once empty field, now we have a research center. And what is the idea of the UNESCO, we are now pushing to this research center becomes a UNESCO Center 2 category. So these are our laboratories. And the empty fields became the center of archaeological research and science. And what you see is the future museum on site, the library, in the field research center, and you can come and live as Roman. You can stay in Roman rooms, wear Roman clothes, eat Roman food. You can experience. To the modern visitor, coming and seeing ruins, it's not anymore important. This is something, tasting Roman food, their spices, and this is something that they will remember. We moved into congressional tourism. In 2018, we built the Congress Center. We have 2 large halls. We have restaurant to support 500 people. We have 480 beds in 80 rooms. We have a full congressional center as a separate complex within the archaeological park. With the 2 lecture rooms, we can hold conferences completely alone for up to 500 people with multiple sessions. These are 2 sessions of the Congress, each holding 300 people. We are going beyond archaeology in paleontology. In 2009, we found the mammoth Vika, the prized winner, and this is the opening, the celebration of Vika's 1 millionth birthday. The children, the discovery of Vika, completely neglected Roman heritage. The Viminacium best is known among the children for its mammoths. And we have annual festivals. This is theater festival. We have sport events like half marathon. We have summer camps. We have international cooperation with China, with Libya, with Germany. And UNESCO is great connection for all of us. We are pushing wonderfully in all directions of international cooperation, and Viminacium and the Archaeological Institute with its field research center tend to be the regional center for archaeology, if not for the whole Europe, then at least for the Southeast Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very interesting presentation about our past and how we look at it from the present. It's clear that we have been missing something. On my next occasion in Serbia, I will visit the place. And now we move from a continent to another, from Europe to Asia, and we move also off topic with Professor Feng Jiang, Chairman of the Council of the Shanghai Academy of Global Governance and Area Studies. So the floor is yours. We will hear some reflections on, in the spirit of scientific multilateralism. You will have to explain what is scientific multilateralism, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thank you, dear
Thank
Carlos, and for introduction, and thank you for your report, Mr. Mrđić. It's wonderful, and so I have the feeling you have enjoyed the research very much, and so I'm eager also to join your team and to get that joy. Actually, and in China, that reminds me also, and in China we have a region of Tufan. Tufan research has also international reputation, and there we have a lot of archaeological discovery, and also some products from Roman Empire. And so the same things as you have presented here, and so I have suddenly the feeling, and everywhere in the world we can have places of different civilizations and of cosmopolitan importance and enjoy. Thank you very much, and maybe we could discuss that somewhat later.
Absolutely.
So now move to my. We have enjoyed your report, but I'm sorry, maybe I will be somewhat serious. And so, firstly, please allow me, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, and to sincerely thank the organizer for inviting me to this conference. I have the feeling through yesterday's discussions, this is really a truly important and inspiring discussion. I'd like to express my sincere respect. Colleagues, among the participants, especially yesterday, I have the feeling I'm something of a minority. Since my academic background is German research and European studies, and with a focus on politics and culture. I'm a linguist, so very seldom space here among us. And this is my first time attending a high professional discussion conference, mainly of natural scientists. And to be very frank, I'm very surprised to see until now how vast the linguistic gap is between natural sciences and humanities. I listened carefully to your presentations, but if I have understood your terminology, I must be lying. So, ladies and gentlemen, but something comes very serious and very important to me. For example, the discussions about accelerators. And we have heard three presentations. I do hope, and the three accelerators in USA, in Switzerland, in China could really cooperate together, and that will be fine. That will be fine. So something like that. When Mr. Ugo Várady mentioned that CO2, carbon dioxide, could cause cognitive decline in human being, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't help silently translating in my mind. What does he mean? I think he's seeing CO2, carbon dioxide, makes us stupid. That's the language of my understanding. And so I was thinking further, only human being? What about other animals, such as lovely dogs and cats? Philosophically articulated, they are also authentic Dasein. Das ist ein deutsches Wort, ein German word. They are also authentic Dasein, whose being in the world, Sein in dieser Welt, engages ours in a profound, mutually constitutive Mitsein, Together-Sein being of intersubjectivity that mirrors our own subjectivity. Does it not mean that the anthropogenic description of the climate order, which already betrays a regression in human rationality, portend also a correlative degradation of their intelligence, thereby implicating them, dogs and lovely cats, into a catastrophe not of their making. So we human beings are also responsible for the declining of the intelligence of cats and dogs, maybe. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you see I'm struggling to translate as I listened, and even checking also on DeepSeek, because I do not know what the special terminology means. So DeepSeek helped me a lot. And yesterday, Mr. Balco-Ford noted that Charlie Chaplin once told Albert Einstein, "The whole world admires you, even if they do not understand you." So, dear colleagues, Chaplin's words echo my own feelings as a scholar of humanities. In front of you, the discussion about the so fascinating scientific and technological discovery. Moreover, my respect runs deeper. You are great scientists, yet you focus on science's impact on humanity. That's great, I think. I believe that. Professor Gary Jacobs astutely pointed out that so much is happening in our world right now, leaving us deeply uncertain about the future. Escalating military spending and remilitarization are making the world less safe, and we are left wondering, can humanity achieve sustainable development? That's also the main topic of the conference. What should science do? Colleagues, pure science is long gone. We were talking yesterday also much about Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, he wanted to do pure research, and Einstein shared that hope. They advised the government even to develop nuclear weapons as deterrent to promote peace, not to use it actually. but nuclear weapons were used. And the science brought unprecedented disaster to humanity. Science cannot trust politics. Science should not be politicized. So I'm, as I've said, humanity is a scholar. So please allow me to be somewhat utopian or romantic. So that's also my hope. Science should not be politicized. We should be aware of that. But not only science. I'm thinking of what Oppenheimer once, he should have said once, blood on our own hands. So that reminds me also a very I respected sentence from the German former president, Weizsäcker. He said once, even the memory of a war, of the responsibility of the war, he meant the Second World War, should not be only collective, but individual. So everyone is responsible for the action. But we have also the possibility to do something. That's very important, I think. Dear colleagues, artificial intelligence now faces the same fate as nuclear science research, a phenomenon I would like to call it Oppenheimer paradox. Well-intended efforts co-opted by politics turn into disasters that betray their original purpose. AI is a product of scientific and technological progress. Researchers and inventors believed, we believe even now, it could bring great convenience to humanity. It should be a great achievement. And in many ways, it does. It has. Yet AI is also but unleashing unprecedented systematic disasters. The use of AI technology nowadays in the battlefield in Ukraine, for example, is a key factor behind the millions of casualties. Yet, political discourse shows no sorrow, mainly blame shifting. Science once again has become a partner of politics, and this time, there is even no Oppenheimer stepping forward. The frenzy around AI technology continues to grow. Related technologies, business, and politics have all become darlings of our era. Why are so tech giants gathered at the presidential inauguration in Washington? So on TV, we can watch it online, alive. So I was thinking at that moment, the words political and technical powers has taken shape. Science is no longer hiding of power politics. It has been power politics itself. Control over AI chips and technology means control over global hegemony. The World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Paris, which I attended, showed just how weak the calls are for a multilateral framework to govern AI. Instead, countries, governments, for example, not the peoples, governments are competing to demonstrate their will to lead in AI and pouring resources into the race. A lot of money, huge money are now announced in AI. So I mentioned just now earlier, I was translating as I listened this isn't just a translation challenge. It reminded me of climate discussions I attended in Paris, in Berlin this February, where the focus was on nations' historical responsibilities, who is responsible, which country, who has the things better, and so on, and the political obligations. And regarding the climate change, this topic. And so a concrete example is whether EU's CBAM is an act of unilateral willfulness or a responsible pioneer for multilateralism. A lot of discussions, a lot of conflict. But people, we normal people have hoped the climate issues could offer an opportunity for international political multilateralism. Since climate disasters are transnational and a shared responsibility for every country, every government, international political multilateralism seemed but inevitable. But what is the reality? It has grown, this political multilateralism concerning climate change control governance. It has grown fragile in the face of increasingly assertive international power politics, reduced to a tool for nations to share responsibility and jostle for interests. Again, it's a new target for power struggle among the nations. Dear colleagues, what I'm saying is when it comes to governing AI and addressing climate change, international political multilateralism among the governments is not to be relied on or is failing, I think. So in the foreseeable future, maybe some days, and so the disaster will be so huge that the governments come to work together. But until now, the situation is not there. So the world needs alternative. Professor Hugo Bardy's presentation title sharply notes that carbon dioxide is both a giver, so he means concretely the CO2, is a giver of life and a bringer of death at the same time, or nowadays. Science is about human survival and death. Molecules are political. Political, I mean, and also he did also mean this. Political is for politicus. We have a lot of colleagues from Greece. I like this word, politicus. Political is for people, not for politician class only. I wholeheartedly agree with Udo. This is a brilliant statement, brilliant idea. To be or not to be remains a question, not only for Shakespeare. An even more urgent one nowadays, where is humanity headed, and what should we do in the science or in the field also in the circle of, or in the community of humanities? I realize that this ultimate human question bridges, so this question bridges natural sciences and the humanities. It is not just a line, a sentence from Shakespeare, and that excites me deeply this time. So I'm so grateful to have this opportunity and to join the discussion. Andrew Tachik yesterday, Andrew Tachik discussed how science can make people healthier and live longer, advocating for global equitable well-being, a very beautiful vision for everybody. So to live, I will be finished, yes. So the humanities, scientific multilateralism, I think that that's also the goal, centered on people themselves, a humanistic multilateralism, not the power and the interest-driven international political multilateralism. I want to again to express my high regard for the conference organizers and contributors. I believe this meeting either proclaims, maybe that's also my hope, proclaims the birth of scientific multilateralism or advance it. Please allow me make two short suggestions. First, on the core content of the scientific multilateralism, at its heart, it's science for people. It's science for the next slide, please. So yes. Scientists should become what Plato once called storytellers, stepping out of ivory towers to share scientific knowledge about humanity with the public, or try to follow the people, not only follow the money. Yesterday we were also discussing about this, and scientists is not to follow money in many situations. We have been talking about this. Only when the public recognizes that climate change is a matter of life and death can we hope to solve it. Science must also have the courage to educate the politicians, striving to make them more rational. The world is too specialized, so that many politicians, they are not in the position to understand the world. So it's quite difficult for them to govern the world. Yeah? So the scientists should have the courage to educate politicians. Such scientific multilateralism should be, so as I have shown here, transdisciplinary. We're all talking about that. But first of all, exchange between natural scientists and humanist scholars. Transboundary. Marian Asantava Nakasa has formulated yesterday between the nations, among the nations. Transclass, even between the different social groups, should be also exchanged. Translingual, I mean not only in different languages, but the jargon, the different languages of different disciplines. That's what I mean, translingual. So second, I suppose publishing the conference ideas, this conference, opinions and informations in multiple languages, integrating multiple disciplines in the spirit of transdisciplinarity, transboundary cooperation, and transclass engagement. My team and I would be very happy to take on this work in Shanghai, from Shanghai out, and to work together with you. And I and my team would be very happy and to share the discussion, to go on with this discussion with you together in Shanghai. So thank you for your attention. I thank you once again for excellent organizer, all contributors and sponsors. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for both speakers for your discipline with timing. Now we have my friend and colleague in the Club of Rome, Robert Costanza, who has several hats, one of them in the Institute of Global Prosperity at UCL, University College London, who will speak about this important topic, sustainable well-being future. Bob?
Thank you, Carlos, and good morning, everyone. So, I'll go through, I'm told I only have 20 minutes, and I think I prepared something a little bit longer, so I'm going to go through the first part rather quickly so I can get to the ending, which I hope is, can you hear me? Yeah? Is this on? Yeah. Which is what I really want to talk about, but I hope you all recognize we live in a whole new geologic era, the Anthropocene, because of the magnitude of human influence on the planet. And I think the bottom line here is that business as usual is no longer an option. If we really hope to create a sustainable and desirable Anthropocene, we need to think and act differently. But this is also an opportunity to build economies and societies that are based on a different goal, on the goal of sustainable well-being of humans and the rest of nature. And I put it in that form just to emphasize that that we are a part of the natural system. We're all on this planet together. So we can't think of humans and nature as separate things, but we're all together. And we need to get past the single-minded pursuit of GDP growth as the path to increasing well-being. So to create this sustainable well-being, I think it requires these three elements of having, first of all, an adequate vision of how the world is, so our scientific understanding of how the world functions. And certainly we're making a lot of progress in that regard, in understanding Earth system science, but also in understanding human psychology and what actually does contribute to well-being. And it goes far beyond consumption and production. But we also need an adequate vision of how we would like the world to be. What are our goals for the economy, for the future of the world? And I'll try to focus more on that in the rest of this talk. But we also need tools and analytical techniques, I think, that are integrated with this understanding and this goal. And I think that's going to require a lot more systems thinking and modeling. How do we understand the whole complex system rather than just the parts? And I think we need some new implementation strategies as well, some new kinds of institutions that can better manage common asset resources, for example. And I think it's going to take some societal therapy, as I'll get into. So we know the world is a complex, adaptive, nonlinear system. There are thresholds, there are tipping points, there are surprises. We know that there are planetary boundaries. There are fundamental ecological constraints. The latest version of this shows that we've already surpassed probably 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. And if you haven't seen that, we know that we're at a critical threshold where the Earth could, tip into a hothouse Earth sort of phenomena, which would be not very good for human society going forward. But we still have the opportunity, I think, to create a stabilized Earth system. Unfortunately, this is not the movie that most people or many people are lining up to go see. It's an inconvenient truth. It's going to take some major changes in our system. So I think in the end, what we need is a third movie. We need a better narrative, a better vision and narrative of the kind of world that we really want. What does a sustainable and desirable economy in society, in the rest of nature look like? And why is that a better place for people oops. Right. So in order to get there too, I think we need to understand what the economy is and what it's for, and have a much broader, more transdisciplinary understanding of the world that we live in. That's what ecological economics has been about. How do we create this more transdisciplinary systems-oriented view structured around these 3 integrated questions or goals of creating an ecologically sustainable scale? How do we stay within planetary boundaries, basically? How do we create a socially fair distribution of wealth and resources, both within the current generation of humans, but also between current and future generations, and between humans and other species and the rest of nature? And how do we create a more economically efficient allocation of resources that goes beyond just market allocation, which doesn't cover everything that's important to human well-being, and especially natural and social capital? Another way of putting this, you've probably seen Kate Rayworth's donut, which shows that we have to stay within planetary boundaries, but we also need to create the elements of well-being and quality of life. We need to operate in this safe and just zone. How do we get there? And that's not the only way of framing these problems. There are several, I think I would call, overlapping ideas about this new approach to economics, including well-being economy, the donut economy, the steady-state economy, the ecological civilization that's being talked about in China, et cetera. And there's a recent paper that I was part of that tried to look at all of these alternative approaches and what they all have in common. And it turns out they have a lot in common, and particularly some of the elements that I've just mentioned. About the ecological, the political, and the social elements that are all going to be necessary for the sustainable and inclusive well-being. But what's the problem? The problem is the old vision, which I think still holds a lot of sway. And this is the cartoon version of what the economy is and what it's for, showing the primary factors of production: land, labor, and capital. It shows that land is kind of grayed out in this vision because there's an assumption of almost perfect substitutability between these factors. So you don't really need land or natural resources, you just need more capital and labor to produce marketed goods and services, which is all that GDP measures, which then contribute to individual utility or welfare. The more we consume, the better off we are. And then you need to reinvest in those capital stocks so that we can keep this economy growing. And there's nothing in this vision that would limit the growth of the economy indefinitely. Private property is best because that's what works best for marketable and marketed goods and services. So the basic premises here are that more is always better. GDP is a good proxy for welfare. This economy can grow forever. There's no limits on the scale. The scale is not an issue. Poverty can best be solved with more growth. So we don't have to worry about distribution. We just make the pie bigger. And nature is really a sideshow, and private property is always best. So what's wrong with that vision? In the Anthropocene, we have to recognize that we do live on a finite planet. Everything has to go somewhere, that these four basic types of assets are all required in a more balanced way to produce both conventional goods and services, but also that contribute directly to human well-being, which is a much more complex function than simply the more we consume, the better off we are. And those include conventional built capital, human capital, not just labor, but individuals and all of their assets, and their education and health. And importantly, social capital, all of our institutions, all of our networks, all of our interactions among people. And finally, our natural capital, everything else in the world that we didn't have to create, the natural world that all contribute in complex ways to our sustainable well-being. And we know that GDP was never designed as a measure of that sustainable well-being. Simon Kuznets, one of the architects of GDP, famously quoted, that goals for more growth should specify of what and for what. What is it that we're trying to grow? It's not just economic activity. It's just not just more marketed stuff. And we know that GDP is a poor measure of well-being. Recent estimates show that approximately half of what is counted as GDP are really defensive expenditures, or things that we really didn't want in the first place. So it's well past time to leave GDP behind as a guidepost, as a measure of progress. There have been a lot of alternatives created. This is just a subset. They fall into these three categories of sort of modifying GDP in some way to take account of its failings. Direct surveys of life satisfaction and indices that include a whole range of different factors. One in particular is called the Genuine Progress Indicator, which starts with personal consumption, but weights it by income distribution to get at the inequality effects. Adds a bunch of things that are left out, like household labor and volunteer work, which should be counted as positives but are not marketed, and subtracts a bunch of things that are really defensive expenditures or costs that should be avoided, the cost of crime, the cost of air and water pollution, et cetera. When you do that, this is a study we did at the global scale, you get pictures that look something like this. GDP continues to grow. GPI tracked it for a while in the post-war period until about 1980, and then started to level off and decline because of increasing inequality, because of increasing environmental damage in particular. So we've moved from a period of what you could call true economic growth to a period of uneconomic growth. We're growing the economy, but it's not economic. It's not really improving even economic welfare, not to mention real, true welfare. And that's just the start of the story. As I said, that doesn't measure everything. And there's been a lot of interest lately in building alternative indicators. And this is a paper that we just published on building consensus on societal well-being indicators. And it turns out that we identified more than 200 different alternatives that are out there. So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that a lot of people are interested in this topic and recognize that we need something different. But it's a curse because they're not talking to each other. They don't recognize, in fact, how similar they are. So we did some semantic modeling of these 210 different indicators, and showed that, in fact, they all do agree with each other on many components. This is a plot of just the number of components in each of these indicators against their similarity with all of the other indicators. And you can see there's kind of a diminishing returns kind of curve. And right around 20 or so components in the indicator, you're capturing
a lot of the similarity that occurs in all of these 210 indicators, but you're not overextending and to a large number of components that would be more difficult to compare. So we ended up with a list of about 19 different components that I think represent the consensus across all of these indicators of what should be included across these 4 different types of capital, of human, social, built, and natural capital. And so we're using this, I think, as the basis for an ongoing discussion to build this broader consensus. And I don't think this is the answer. I think this is the recognition that there is broad agreement already. Let's get all of the different stakeholders together. Let's come up with something that we can all agree on. And that, I think, will have the political power to overcome GDP. This is being done as part of a large EU-funded project called Merge, which includes a whole range of different participants, including some of the statistical agencies and the policy groups and think tanks and universities. And our goal really is to move away from this integrated system because GDP is based on the goal of growing that GDP. So that measure really contributes to it. And it's underlined by the models of the economy that really support it. You know, the system of national accounts, the whole sort of linear input-output model that's tied in directly with GDP, which supports the policies of maximizing GDP. So it's all part of a more integrated system. We can't just change the metrics. I think we have to change the metrics, the models, the goal, fundamental goal, and that I think will facilitate or motivate the policies necessary to help achieve that goal. So, and I think part of the problem, or a way of thinking of the problem, like why haven't we done this already? I think for decades we've known that GDP was not headed in the right direction, that we're depleting our natural resources, climate change, all of that, the whole range of problems that we've recognized have been known for a long time. But I think we are, in a very real way, addicted to the current system. We're locked in because of all the positive feedbacks that are embedded in that system that are going to be very difficult to break away from. So breaking our addiction to this growth at all cost paradigm, to fossil fuels, to overconsumption in high-income countries and inequality, et cetera, is going to take more than simply pointing out that it's a problem, in the same way that pointing out to an addict that they're addicted and they should stop doing it doesn't really help. So it's going to take therapy of some kind. I'm not sure what exactly that will look like, but I think here's some ideas on what it might look like. And we've done some work with psychologists looking at what works at the individual scale to overcome addictions, and could we scale that up? Could we learn from that anyway? And it turns out that there's a therapy called motivational interviewing that is quite effective at the individual scale. And instead of confronting addicts, it engages them in a discussion about a positive discussion about their goals, their futures, their life goals. What do they want to achieve with their life? Once you've established that, then that can help motivate the difficult changes that are necessary. And only until you've established that can you really adequately motivate those changes. So the obvious analogy at the societal scale is, what are our societal goals? What are our shared societal goals? How do we build that shared vision of everything that we want to achieve? The SDGs are certainly a major step in that direction. But I don't think they've been communicated very well, even within the policy community, but certainly not to the general public. I'm not sure that the general public even has ever heard of the SDGs, much less can identify even one or two of them. So I think that's the challenge going forward, and I think that's really where the arts community can help. So how do we actually show what the world would look like if we achieved the SDGs, and how would that compare with the alternative futures that could happen if we don't do that? So this whole idea of scenario planning, how do we put these pictures out to the public and get some idea of what they really want, and use that to help build this broader shared vision of the kind of world that we want. We've done a bit of that with a survey in Australia where we created these 4 visions, very similar to the Great Transition Initiative, sort of archetypical scenarios with slightly different names to sort of try to avoid having too value-laden of names. But anyway, they ended up looking like this. And then we had a survey of 2,000 a representative sample of about 2,000 Australians. And we got answers that looked like this. The community well-being, sustainable SDG kind of vision was ranked first or second by over a vast majority, 72% of the population. Part of the problem in doing this kind of survey is, well, how do you explain those visions? How do you do that in a compact enough way that you could really get the vision across? You know, and we used like a short paragraph and a couple of bullet points, and that's probably not quite enough. There have been some additional surveys like this. This is one that was done over a whole range of different countries with a slightly more simplified survey question. And they had just two alternative futures, the business as usual one and the sustainable SDG type vision. But you can see by large margins in every country they surveyed that the sustainable vision was much preferred, is much more desirable by people to go there. So what's and a recent survey supported by the Club of Rome of OECD countries also, I think, confirmed that kind of idea, that there is strong support in the survey that the way the economy works should prioritize health and well-being and nature rather than focusing solely on profit and increasing wealth, et cetera. So I think there is broad agreement out there. But how do we actually crystallize that a bit more? And how do we get a broad section of society to recognize that there are alternative futures? And the one that we're headed toward is not the one that I think most people want. So to address that challenge, we're going to announce shortly a alternative future video contest. And the idea here is to get a whole range of filmmakers to create short videos of these alternative futures that can then go out to the general public and get this kind of interest and support in thinking about what the alternatives are, and use those to sort of solicit survey results as well as to what people are thinking, and to sort of help bring together and motivate those kinds of changes. So this is being supported by TVE, the TV for the Environment. They've been running Global Sustainability Film Awards, and so this will be, the creative challenge here is for the filmmakers to create short videos of each of these four futures, and have the same filmmaker do all four. So we'll probably have, in the end, about 10 final contestants. We'll do it in a two-stage process where there's first a pitch or a short proposal, so that we can have this open to a really broad range of potential filmmakers. So this won't be very difficult or expensive to produce the pitch. We'll then have a commission that will select 5 to 10 finalists that will then fund to produce the final versions of those films. And then we'll have this diverse portfolio of short films that will increase public awareness, create actionable research insights, and this strengthen this global network of filmmakers and experts, get people thinking about what kind of world we really could have and what kind of world we really want to have. So another initiative, and I think in the end, what we're aiming for is a broad movement, or movement of movements, if you will, that can support sustainable and inclusive well-being as our primary goal, and all of the things that entails. And to change the political environment to support that kind of movement. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance is one group that's trying to build that movement. I think the Club of Rome is also an organization that's contributing to that. And like I said, it's a movement of movements. I think there are many different movements that are all sort of heading in this direction, but I think our challenge really is to bring them together to get the critical mass that's going to be necessary to take that step. And of course, things look bleak at the moment. But you can argue that, and we are in a crisis. I think that's clear to most people. But you can also think of that as an opportunity, that a crisis is maybe what's really necessary to shake up the system enough to allow new ideas to actually manifest themselves, to really make changes. I don't know if any of you have read Neil Howe's book about the fourth turning and the fact that this is kind of a regular event in history, that societies go through these crisis periods and then they get resolved and we get better outcomes. But I think our challenge right now is to be ready, when this crisis is resolved, with the ideas, with the vision, with the kind of world that we want to build, because otherwise it could degrade into an even worse situation. So, and if you want to learn more about any of the things that I've talked about, here's 3 recent books that go into more details, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bob, also for compressing a very rich presentation with a lot of substance in. You made it perfectly, so thank you so much for that as well, for the content and the presentation skills. And now we shift yet to another domain which is interestingly not so usual in this kind of discussions, that of international law, with Tibor Várady from the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I would like to focus on international law and international human rights, and in particular on the cohabitation of realities and phrases within the realm of international law. International law has always been in part a dream, in part a reality. In 1945, after the end of World War II, there was a very, very strong and clearly laudable attempt to turn human rights into world values. And the vehicle was the UN Charter. The UN Charter was adopted in 1945, and it starts with very important principles. Let me read some of these principles. The people of the United Nations are determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights and the dignity and worth of the human persons, to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties can be maintained. There has been a general recognition and approval of these principles. But some experts also express criticism. Criticism on the ground that these principles are somewhat too vague and allow too much maneuvering room. For example, an excellent professor, one of the best-known American international law lawyers, who was also a judge at the International Court of Justice, Thomas Bürgenthal, he said that there was somewhat less precision and somewhat less detail. And he said, and I'm quoting him, that was to be expected, for each of the principal victorious power had troublesome human rights problems of its own. The Soviet Union had its Gulag. The United States, its de jure racial discrimination. France and Great Britain had their colonial empires. Given their own vulnerability as far as human rights were concerned, it was not in the interest of these countries to draft a charter that established an effective international system of human rights. This is Bürgenthal's observation. Let me say that after quite a number of international treaties were enacted, in which somewhat more details were included than in the Charter itself. But it remains a fact that the cohabitation of principles, phrases, and realities remained, I would say, sustainable problem. Now, let me give an example. I was born in the region of Banat, which, just like Belgrade, was under German occupation under World War II. And one of the strongest and most human endeavors during the German occupation was fight against fascism and against Nazis. And no one can contest this principle as a driving force. But then after the end of World War II, this driving force took some steps beyond reality. Recently, I have been dealing with legal archives of my family, the attorney's family, and I was writing books of documentary prose, and I found some very interesting cases from 45, 46, in which the essential issue and the essential problem is to treat completely justified anti-fascism as a drive, as a swing, which takes us beyond reality. So I'm watching a case in which a man called Branko Đurić was charged criminally, and the criminal act he committed was, according to the prosecutor, that he was keeping in his garden 2 pigs of fascist origin. Now, what were 2 pigs of fascist origin? At that time, there were some rules against the local Germans, and these rules were going not exactly in line with human rights. Not only those Germans were punished who joined the German occupation forces, but there was a confiscation of all German property. Now, many local Germans had friends and neighbors who were Serbs and Hungarians and Slovaks, and they gave to their neighbors some pieces of property in order to save it from confiscation. Now, Branko Đurić had a German neighbor who was a good guy, just like Branko Đurić, and the German neighbor gave 2 pigs to Branko Đurić in order to stop from being confiscated. But Branko Đurić was accused, and the criminal trial started against him. My father defended him on ground that he was keeping in his garden pigs of fascist origin. So anti-fascism is fine, but it may turn into a phrase. Let me give another example. A Lutheran priest was charged for having committed an anti-people smile. What was the anti-people smile? When the partisans and the Red Army were marching into our town, according to a neighbor, this Lutheran priest was standing behind the window of his parish, and he was watching with a cynical smile the entrance of the partisans of the Red Army. On ground of this, he was charged of having committed an anti-people smile. The prosecutor asked a punishment of 5 years. My father was defended, and eventually Csepcsányi was the name of the Lutheran priest. He got 11 months of prison for having committed an anti-people smile. So the point I'm trying to make is that there is a very important and very dangerous difference between principles and phrases, and even very positive principles can be turned into phrases. Now, turning again to main fields of international law, one of the basic attempts of the UN Charter was to save generations from the scourge of war and not to have war. And therefore, criminal charges have been raised against those who started wars. Now, after World War II, there was a Nuremberg trials were clearly against the losers. Today we have criminal charges against states and persons who are not losers. There are criminal charges against Putin, there are criminal charges against Netanyahu, there are some other criminal charges. Now the question is here whether we have a full playground for reality, or whether we have again a playground where phrases are getting mixed into reality. Some authors have been writing, and even some monographs, books have been written about the so-called phenomenon of whataboutism. Now, what is whataboutism? Whataboutism is an argument, and the essence of the argument is that I cannot be punished because other guys are doing the same thing and they are not getting punished. And there is an author, Liebig is his name, and he wrote a lot about the use of the word of whataboutism. And I'm citing him. In fact, whataboutism is often the first line of defense that states invoke when condemned by other international actors. For example, in recent years, whataboutism has been the key argumentative tactic deployed by Russia to defend its invasion of Ukraine. Actually, before Russia, the USSR was using the same argument. After its invasion of Hungary in 1956, the US stated its arguments against the USSR in the UN Security Council that it was just a smokescreen for the contemporary intervention of the UK and France in Egypt and the Suez Crisis. So the whataboutist argument is that international law cannot really act if others are doing the same thing. Now, one has to deal with whataboutism, and one has to find steps to move from whataboutism towards the reality of international law. The argument that there have been Western misdeeds is not a meaningless argument, but it doesn't mean that a misdeed by Russia or by another actor is justified. So the argument that others have been doing the same thing is now very much present in the arguing world. Again, it even got a name, the name whataboutism. But this, even if one accepts that the whataboutist argument is not without any foundation, that others also committed things, one has to make a very, very strong attempt to turn into reality from the world of phrases. And reality is that whoever who committed, and whether others doing the same thing or not, everybody who is committing a violation should have consequences. Now let me mention another trend in the world of phrases, and this is known as woke. Now woke is generally perceived as a liberal trend, which is following true and justified routes, but reaching well beyond reality. For example, in the United States, there is now a movement inspired by a very, very positive and human inspiration, and this is anti-racism. But when anti-racism is turning from a true human value into a phrase, then it has the following consequences that, for example, PEN America, this American Writers Association, concluded that between July 2021 and June 2022, 2,532 books were cancelled from libraries, and this is called the so-called cancel culture, for having anti-racist content. And among the books which were banned are also the books of Mark Twain, for example, Huckleberry Finn. Now, of course, one has to agree that racism is wrong. But it is very important to keep distance between reality and phrases and swings. Because if you ride on a swing, then the swing might lead to prohibition, or at least that it has to be out from the library, even of Mark Twain and of Huckleberry Finn. Now, of course, woke is a swing which is also on the other side, on the anti-liberal side. I was reading a couple of years ago about a case in which at Yale University prohibited a lecture by a well-known lawyer, Kristen Wagoner is her name, because she was a lawyer who defended a florist who refused to send flowers to homosexual couples. Now, of course, I'm not on the side of the florist, but of course, every legal proceeding has to allow also a lawyer on whatever side, even on the side of the killer. But Yale prohibited this Kristen Wagoner to give a lecture because she was on the wrong side. Now, after this, a federal judge and a number of federal judges decided not to hire any more law students who graduated at Yale, because Yale is not allowing Kristen Wagoner to have a lecture. Therefore, students from Yale do not deserve to become lawyers. So again, Yale is one of the best law schools in the world. So again, the problem is that swings are taking us well beyond reality. And this is a fact, even if the swing has a justification. Because anti-racism, for example, is, of course, a fully qualified value. But if it turns into a swing which prohibits Mark Twain's books and Huckleberry Finn, then we have a very odd cohabitation between principles and realities. Now let me mention another interesting example. One of the important principles of human rights, which has been underlined many times in both the UN Charter and in many other cases, is equality. Equality, notwithstanding race, notwithstanding man or woman, notwithstanding religion, just equality, but also equality of socially discriminated people. Now here, many authors have noted that the equality of the working class has for many years been somehow outside a true focus, because it was in the focus of the fight between communism and anti-communism. And somehow there were strong beliefs that whatever communists say is wrong, or whatever anti-communists say is wrong, and therefore a true view and a true perception of what is really the working class and what is its situation is somehow has avoided attention. Now, I would like to mention here some really excellent scholars and scientists who noted that actually even during the fight of ideologies, there have been some getting near of rules under communism and anti-communism. John Quigley is writing a book about Soviet legal innovation and the law of the Western world. And he starts with a very strong and obviously justified criticism of the Soviet legal system. But he also says that at some point the Soviet legal system was well ahead of the West. For example, in the field of equality of women. The Soviet legal system immediately established equality. Whether this yielded actual, real equality is another question. At the same time, in Switzerland, women had no voting right. In Germany, women had no right to have a bank account. Now, one of the reasons against, according to Quigley, was that there was no democracy in the Soviet Union. So principles were accepted as legal rules. There was no possible opposition, which included many bad principles, but included some good principles as well. And John Quigley also adds that there was some movement towards more workers' rights, and I'm citing John Quigley, to dampen the attraction of Bolshevism in Western Europe. The Allies took a major step. They formed a structure to deal with workers' rights, the International Labour Organization. International Labour Organization was a Western organization, and according to Quigley, it was created, and one of the inspirations was to dampen the attraction of Bolshevism. So it's very interesting to have confronting ideologies to see how did they actually have an impact on each other. But this confrontation and the swings of confrontation are also moving us away from the reality of human rights. It is a very interesting question whether after the end of communism, whether workers' rights had a progress or a step back. And there have been many true studies devoted to this. It is interesting that in recent times, a number of countries enacted acts with a very provocative title, which title is a slogan towards human rights, and these are actually modern slavery acts. A modern slavery act was accepted in the UK, it was accepted also in Australia. Now, it is not really stated that what we have in the UK or in Australia is slavery. But it is interesting to put a principle, I could say maybe a phrase, a slogan, with the aim to get aware that we have a problem. So phrases and slogans are sometimes pushing us towards reality, more often are pushing us away from reality. I think it is very, very important to have a true scientific view and to be able to observe what is remaining between truth and phrases. For example, there are quite a few analyses that at some points human rights in regarding workers are having a really bad period. For example, it was a study, according to Oxfam, indeed of modern slavery, in which it was communicated in May 2016 that a good number of US poultry farms, in these poultry farms, bathroom breaks are denied. Instead, poultry workers may wear diapers. So they may wear diapers, but they cannot go to the toilet because it's prohibited.
Professor Várady, time is out.
Yes, then it is my right sentence that it is really truly important to be aware of a distance and the difference between truth and principles and realities and phrases. And this is the only way to make a step really towards realities instead of phrases. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, very interesting set of presentations on diverse aspects, dimensions. And now we still have a bit of time for some questions here. Well,
thank you very much. It was a great variety of talks and topics. Let me start with Professor Feng Jiang, because you underlined what I also did yesterday, the rule of responsibility and sustainability of innovation. And that is connected with the topic of Robert Costanza, because he was arguing for a transformation of our economy to a sustainable economy. Now, my question is, these ideas are not new. We had a lot of experience about that and discussions. How can we realize sustainable innovation? Innovation is the basics of our welfare. There is no question. I think so. For example, in my country, Germany, the last government was on the green side, and there was a good communication, but the people and the industry did not accept it. That is the problem. How can we realize the sustainable innovation by incentives to the companies and to the scientists? Because the scientists, in the end, they must develop sustainable, innovative technology. And so how can we realize that?
Thank
question
you.
To the economist and question to the
Question clear.
philosopher.
Thank you.
Governance.
So, who of the two of you who would start?
Well, technology is a good servant, but a poor master. And I think we do not want to follow the technology wherever it leads. I think the fundamental problem is to create a shared vision of the kind of world that we want and let that determine the kind of technology and the use of the technologies that we do have and what kind of innovation really is supported. And I think we don't have that shared vision now. We definitely have divergent visions. We have the conventional, vision of let's just maximize GDP, and if you're trying to do that, certain kinds of technologies are better than others. But if that's not your goal, if your goal is to improve sustainable well-being, you're going to get a different approach to technology. So the missing element is building the shared vision. I think that's what we need to focus on now.
Sorry. By the way, I mean, you don't know how right you are because you were not here yesterday, but we had the vision proposed by Professor Giga Turk, which is almost the opposite of what we have, as sustainable well-being. But Professor Jiang.
Thank you for the question, but I really do not have the vision how to make innovation possible. But I think only 2 points are, for my opinion, I think very dangerous for information. The first point is, and innovation is very much politicized. So everything innovated, then that will have at once a political dimension. This is something for power, for power politics. That is the point. And the second point, I do not have this word in English. Maybe just try to innovate such a word. That is, innovation is too much scienticized. Too much in the circle of scientists. That's the narrate of innovation. So that's why I used the Greek word, politikos. So, and the innovation must be returned back to normal people. Actually, that's the life, c'est la vie. So that's why I mean, science must be done for the people and by the people. So that's why I, as a linguist, I've asked to allow me to be romantic. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you very much for very provocative and stimulating presentations. I have individual questions for each one of you, which I will catch at the coffee hour. But let me try to see if I can frame this question so that all of you can maybe have a shot at it. And it's a question of vision. Vision underlying science, vision underlying sustainability, vision underlying the kind of values that Tibor mentioned in his talk. And all these visions emanate from the great project of enlightenment 300 years ago, out of which came science, came art, and out of science came ideas that we are benefiting from today, and sustainability is one of them. But what I'm seeing outside of this conference, at the United Nations yesterday, in the Trump administration for the last full year almost, that the vision that is being pursued by the very powerful leaders, not only in the United States, but around the world, is not consistent with enlightenment. It is actually moving towards the opposite direction of autocracy, of derogating science as not the only way to get knowledge, using power, using other political interests. So in this move towards a kind of dark enlightenment, as some people are calling it, how do scientists and artists jointly react? I mean, are we going to keep on pretending that all of that stuff is not happening and keep moving in the directions that we have been moving? Or do we need a radical new vision for science and art? And I think Science for the People has some elements of it. But I'd like to see the panel flesh out for this conference that a vision, that a narrative that is at least comparable to what 77 million people in the United States don't agree with our current vision, who voted for Trump. And now he's implementing his vision, which is Elon Musk and all those other billionaires, and they're taking the world in the wrong direction. So any reactions to that?
I guess Bob will react, and I hope the rest of the speakers as well. Yeah, go ahead, if you wish.
Well, I don't think 77 million people in the U.S. really agree with the direction that things are going right now. I think they were conned into thinking that things were going to improve, and they were two times, yes, and I think they were really voting for change, not for the kind of change. I think the majority would have voted for Bernie Sanders had he been on the ballot, because I think that's more consistent, I think, with the vision that most people want. There was a really interesting study done in the U.S. where they took 1,700 policy decisions that had been made, and they looked at whether those policies were in favor of the special interests or in favor of the public opinion. And what percentage do you think were in favor of public opinion, as opposed to the 0%? So it's not a real democracy. It's really a plutocracy at best. It's becoming more of an autocracy, and I think that's the fundamental problem, is we actually need democracy. Democracy is a good idea, and we ought to try it. So, and we're talking about real democracy, and there's ideas around deliberative democracy, citizen assemblies, that's being tried in a few countries. Ireland had a really interesting experience with that kind of thing. And I think that's the kind of reinvention of the Enlightenment, if you will, because the Enlightenment was all about democracy, but we really never quite got there. So I think it's time to really think about what does democracy really look like, and how can we implement that. And I think that would address many of these issues, because then you would get the kind of vision, the kind of world that most people really want, not the kind of world that the elite, the special interests are pushing. And I think that's where we're headed now. And I think there's growing pushback against what's happening in the United States in a lot of different ways. And I think that crisis I think Trump's going to crash the system sooner or later, hopefully sooner, so that it can be rebuilt in a better way.
You remind me of Gandhi saying that Western civilization would be a good idea. You know? Yeah. So what you said about let's practice democracy. Any other reactions from the? Yes, please.
So I'm deeply concerned. Politicized technology is a process of monopolizing the global structure. That's very dangerous. So everywhere, every corner of this world will be monopolized with the same monostructure. That's the dangerous, the huge danger for our human being. So I think that's more dangerous than we are just talking about democracy or not democracy, European, Chinese or something. The very deepest danger is this monopolization of the global structure through politicized technology. So we, no matter natural scientists or humanity scientists, we should do something to tell the story for the normal people, for children. For example, I share my opinions every summer with pupils in Shanghai. So just to open their eye, their vision to the outside world. That's why my suggestion just now, please, and really to make the discussion here public, not only in the circle of scientists, please go out also. That's why, thank you.
Any other reaction? I mean, not mandatory. Maybe later there is. I think we will not have time for all questions, but Stephen, you raised your hand a while ago.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the first question that we heard, we had this framing of innovation and the need for innovation as something that has to be encompassed in solutions that we're finding. And what I took away from that was an implicit understanding that there's a great disconnect between the elegant scenarios that we're imagining and even the processes, the highly technocratic processes that we're trying to, through the SDGs and so forth, that we're trying to realize through intergovernmental and multilateral institutions. And the reality of what actually would be necessary to see achievement toward a more sustainable planet, more sustainable societies. So in Bob Costanza's framing, I think he begins from the systems view that we're exceeding planetary boundaries already, and that this is an emergency. And that's a view that I'm very sympathetic with. At the same time, I realize that without industry, without the private sector, it's very hard to achieve meaningful progress towards remediating this crisis that we're facing right now. And so we have this same disconnect between what we know maybe needs to be achieved and how we can achieve it. And that seems to be the principal problem, I think, that helps to frame much of what the crisis of multilateralism, but also helps to account for the populist sort of resurgence that we've seen in the United States, where people are voting against their own interests because people feel disaffected and left behind. So I think this is the principal question. How do we bridge that gap?
Any ideas? I mean, I think you already exposed your ideas on exactly addressing this gap, but any other comment?
This is on a much lighter note. I'm really curious what people say when they're eating the Roman feast, because this is food that was made without electricity and all the different things that we have today. When I think of what lots of young people do today whenever they want to have food, they buy something in a carton box, they open up the microwave, they go 1 minute and bing! And what are their reactions when they're seeing food made from centuries ago?
Reactions are wonderful. Actually, that's one of the best products of the archaeological park. And it started as a game. We wanted to taste ourselves. So from the archaeological experiment, we made a tourist product. And everyone is adorned because these spices, it's something what you cannot taste in fast food. As you said, microwave is something what we more or less all of us live, and it's a good change. So the whole idea, the whole process is very positive. And even for team buildings, from schools, for summer schools and camps, we have the workshops that you produce your own food, bake it in the ovens, and taste it. So you can eventually finalize the whole process. Everyone is happy, but no one wants to get back to the same principles. They still want to live on the fast food because it's fast, it's easy. People, even some of our mothers and fathers, they had a lot more time in their life when they come back from work to prepare food. And it was like a ritual. Now eating is not a ritual anymore. It's just to survive, not to be hungry. And that's why you see the people, the glimmer in their eyes, it's a change. It's a way to change. It's a way to influence their opinions. That's the best mark they bring from archaeology. Really. I tasted something. We have even, we bring tourists to help in excavations, in such programs. Nothing can compare to tasting food. Because that's something up close and personal.
On these both humanistic and down-to-earth note, I'm afraid we have to close this session. I know that some questions have been not addressed. What you said reminds me of an untypical quote for a space like this. It's from one of Harry Potter's movie, when it is said that life is not about choosing between the good and the bad, but between the good and the easy. So I hope this session has been inspiring you. We have now a coffee break, and at 10:45 there is another session also on the contributions of humanistic and social sciences. Enjoy the rest of the day, and please engage in conversations. Thank you.